Welcome back to Open Spaces Podcast. So far in episode 1, you heard how Jourdan and I met. You heard me drop in a big secret that I had held in my life to her for the very first time. Episode 2, you heard more of my story, my background, my history. You heard in episode 3, that same thing with Jourdan, her background, her history. And so now this is where we're picking up.
Yeah, today we are picking up where we left off in episode 1. So welcome to Open Spaces.
So it's 2005, and where we left off in episode 1 is we have been dating for a couple years at this point. You had felt, you had felt the tension.
Yeah.
Something is off.
We'd already broken up once when we were kind of long distance, and it seemed
because you were
like
still
a
in
normal
college. I was
breakup.
working corporate world.
Yeah, it seemed like, we're in two different places in life. So we had gotten back together when I moved to Texas. And then at this point, we had been dating for a while. We'd been back together for a while. And when you told me your story, like your big secret.
Same-sex attracted.
Yeah.
And then from that, so now this moment happens and we leave the moment and go back to life, but we're now in this, you're in it with me. And you would say that you've said that you felt probably like you were naive in some of that of like what it would really look like moving forward.
For sure.
Because you might have thought, well, yeah, everything's can still work out. You still have very much a view of like pray and everything's going to be great.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that there was going to be more challenging, but I think we had that unlocked a deeper like emotional intimacy between us so that I felt good about that.
Yeah.
But we had that kind of set us into our path with counseling. So we went through a lot of counseling together.
Yeah, couples counseling, sitting together.
Yeah.
Talking to our counselor who we, at that point, we still say to this day that we wouldn't be married without
absolutely
his voice in our life. We did that for how many years? We were multiple years of counseling with him.
Well, we were in that season, we went probably every other week and we stayed with him for a long time. But eventually, I think we were trying to work out what does this look like?
Yeah.
And so talk about that from your perspective. Like when you have finally told me, what were you thinking? Like, what were you thinking in those days and months after that when we're going to counseling and now you have aired out, this secret? What was that like for you in those days of our dating?
I don't think I knew. I think it was like very blurry for me. I think I was just kind of floundering because I was like, well, now she knows. No one else knows other than this counselor.
Did you feel like happy about that? Relieved at all?
I've definitely felt relieved that somebody knew, but I also didn't have tools. I was getting tools in counseling. Like I was like, every time I sat with the counselor, I was like, so what am I supposed to do here? What am I supposed to do here? And he just, as we learned, Romans 8:28 was always his like, all things work together. And so it was like, I constantly just kind of like needed somebody to be speaking hope over me. I didn't have it for myself. So I was more like, okay, I'll take in whatever he's saying. And
would you say that was your main tool, was the hope that he was helping us gain? Or can you talk about any of the practical things in that time?
Practically, like so the way that I would say it is like I was trying to come out of a lifestyle. Now I would say it was a sexual addiction that I was in. I was in this thing and didn't know how to coin it, phrase it, what to say about it. But I was like, okay, I'm trying to remove myself out of the way that I've been operating. So for me, I was acting out. I mean, some people in this struggle don't act out in it, and it's a mental game for them and other areas, but like physically acting out with another person. And so I was doing that. And so for me, the sobriety periods got longer. That's how I was looking at it. I would, if I had an encounter or acted out, it would be, at first it was like a couple months until the next one, and then a couple months more, the next one, and the periods got longer, but I still was not knowing how to tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
so there
important
was
to understand is that while you had shared with me and you were sharing with me and like a level of what you were dealing with, I still didn't know the fullness of it.
Yeah.
In that season.
Which I just, again, I was, the listener's wondering, yes, I was cheating. Like I cheated on you in that. And now I'm not justifying cheating at all. And I wouldn't say, I want to be very clear that I was cheating. I was like wrong. But I didn't, just for me, I was so blurry and so messed up that it felt like it was like this other person's doing that. And then that person's doing that, but then this other person is showing up with Jourdan and like pushing into this relationship. And to be clear, we weren't physical. I mean, people might wonder that. People may say, well, you're same-sex attracted. And in our dating.
Well, we weren't having sex, but we were kissing.
Yeah, we were kissing. And
that seemed pretty normal to me.
Yeah. And because you had you
can say it.
you were wearing your purity ring and
I wasn't super experienced, but I did know that
I wouldn't say experienced at all, but it's just how it was. And I'm grateful for that. I mean, that was something to celebrate. We were laughing, something to celebrate.
Yes.
But we were coming at it from two completely different backgrounds.
Yes, that's the point.
The point is that I was a mess. You were living a life of trying to be pure. And so when we're just kissing, you're like, obviously this is like our boundaries in dating.
Sure.
And I think for me, it's easy in the Christian card to be like, well, we're just obviously kissing is all that God would want. So we're not going to go any further than that.
Yeah. So it was a good, like kind of good Christian boundary for you.
So I want to pause real quick because I want to go back to something I just said that I'm thinking, I said something about sexual addiction and I, especially with same-sex attraction, homosexuality, so many things get coined with that. And what I'm not saying is that anyone who struggles with same-sex attraction, it's a sexual addiction. And, there's a lot of stereotypes that get put on this specific struggle, which you and I now have heard all of it from you're a pedophile. If that's you can't be around kids. Like there's a million things that people put on it, a lot of assumptions. So I'm not saying that me personally,
to everybody.
No, yeah. Me personally, I think what I would look at is like, I had another, I mean, that was my addiction, is like trying to just please my flesh. And that was something that I had to work through.
So you are talking about in that season, you had confessed, generally speaking, you had confessed the general issue, and we start working through that together in counseling and in our dating. And you still have some secrets, essentially. You still have some hidden parts that you're also trying to work through. And I don't know that yet. But I do know that I want to figure out how to work together and how to help you. And I definitely fumbled my way through that. So I was like I talked about this in the last episode of just trying to figure out how to help you. But to me, I came from this very rigid background, a lot of black and white thinking, and I'm trying to grow. And I really am trying to make efforts towards understanding you, but I still have my framework for what I think obedience looks like, what I think, living a godly life looks like. And I'm kind of imposing some of that on you. So that was bringing,
which was helpful for me. I mean,
maybe there was some, you can speak to that, but I think there was also some tension there.
Yeah.
And eventually, and I don't remember how long from the time you told me to the time we ended up breaking up again. But it just became too much. And the tension kind of had grown stronger, and we broke up, again. And this
is the second breakup.
This is our second breakup.
And at this time, I think it's helpful too, just to talk through, at this time I had, started letting some people in outside of you and my counselor. I had started opening the door to some guys in my life. And it was small. And so I would say to the listener, like, you have to know your people, of like, who are the trusted people to start opening the door. But I had started doing that. And Had you at this point?
Not the specifics.
Okay.
I think there was
You
one
had just said,
other
hey,
couple
Jeff and I
that
are having
knew.
some tension and like we're.
Yeah, I think there was one other couple that knew. So yeah, I was kind of still dealing with the specifics of your struggle on my own, except thankfully I had counseling, which that was my outlet.
Were you reading books on homosexuality? Were you?
There was like at that time, I think there was one book that I was starting to read that was kind of helping me understand a little bit more.
You didn't have resources or anything?
Yeah, not a lot of resources. Nobody that I knew personally.
Yeah.
That except for our counselor. So we both stayed in counseling separately at that time, which was super helpful.
That was always interesting. Do you remember how you would be if we had he tried to book our days separate, but there were a couple of times when we'd pass each other.
Yeah,
going into counseling. This is when after our second breakup.
Yes,
we're going individually. I'm sitting in the waiting room. Sometimes you would walk out, and he would always warn us. Though I think he warned us a couple of times, like, "Hey, next week you may just want to show up a little late. You're bumping up into somebody else."
Oh, always trying to protect though.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was a devastating breakup, but I was still holding on to hope at that point. Yeah. And I think in my heart I thought, I do still think we can do this. And I was still hopeful, prayerful, and actually that breakup was probably like 6 months, I think and then you came back to me and said, I want to give this another shot. Like, and basically like, I'm ready, like all in, let's do this.
I think, and I think what I was thinking is, oh, my sobriety periods have gotten real long. Like I'm coming out of this, like I'm not acting out. So we can do this now. Like I have enough, willpower that I can be in a relationship with a girl and it's gonna work.
Yes. You thought you could like muscle through it.
Yeah.
So we get back together, and then an amazing story from that time, I think, is that you had recorded an album in that season as well, and you were doing the album release concert at our church, and we just got back together. I was singing with you at this event, and you said you called it out from stage.
Yes, it was literally like what would be your wedding. All of your album release, there's 1,000 people in the room. It's all of our friends, family. It's basically like a wedding. And I say,
and you're introducing everybody on stage, and you introduced me, and at this point, we had been leading worship together for many years. We had like a small platform in Texas,
and everyone was invested in the story of us, not the depths and not the knowing all the behind the scenes, but everyone's invested in the room. Everyone's invested in us.
And so you said, like on the mic, you were like, now we got back together. I know you guys have been on the road on this journey with us.
And this is going to be forever.
You said, all that's missing is the ring.
All that's missing is the ring.
That's what you
Everyone
said from
cheered,
stage.
Clapped. Everybody was like super behind us.
And then just a few months later, we broke up again.
So, again, if you want any dating advice or anything, how to do it right, like definitely come to me.
Yeah.
Write some good curriculum. Yeah.
So that breakup was that at that point.
Well, I think let's talk for a second. People might be wondering, you still didn't know a lot of things that were behind the scenes at this point. Because I think people would wonder the second time we get back together, like what you're talking about, we get back together. But when we get back together, I think people would wonder, like, I think it's hard for people to think you would want to.
Right. And I think and also in that season, you told me when we got after the second breakup, we get back together, and that you did confess your cheating to me at that point.
Okay.
And you brought me in on what more of the fullness of the story. And that was...
What was that like for you?
That was a major blow. I think I felt... It was actually when we were broken up that you told me.
I remember that because I think I called you. We met in a parking lot.
Yeah, we met in the parking lot.
And I said, hey, I just want part of my healing and growing is to tell you that this is how it plays out for me and what I have done in the past while we were together. And that was important. I think that was important for me because whether or not we were going to be together, I felt like that was part of my to be a whole, honest person.
Right.
I didn't want secrets. I did not want to live in the dark. So for me to start moving towards the light and towards moving, like living an open space life, like
Yeah.
I needed to tell you, and I didn't. It wasn't like to get, obviously it's not to get you back. You don't go tell someone I cheated on you while we were together to try to get you back. But I wanted to be whole.
Right.
And it was part of my journey
Mm-hmm.
of being able to do that. And I had completely wronged you. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame because of that, and hated that about our story. And I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And so we had met, I shared with you, but then when you walk away from that, what were you thinking, getting back in your car and you're like, oh, that's how it worked?
I think I felt a lot of my naivete was revealed in that moment of thinking, of realizing like,
Yeah,
I
just burst the
have
bubble.
been I have been I really thought that this was different. I thought that he was changing. I thought that he could change. I thought, and now, so I felt stupid. I felt, obviously felt betrayed because I was. And at the same time, I feel like I can see how the Lord was preparing me for that information, because someone else in my life had just revealed something similar about themselves to me that was very close to me. And so I was already in this space of processing, thinking someone was, a certain thing or way all of their lives, and then realizing that there had been a betrayal in the past that I never knew about, but it severely impacted the way that I kind of viewed so many things at that point. So I was already in a space of processing that when you told me that you had cheated on me. And
can I interrupt you for a second? And you just mentioned, so I've just told you this new piece of information about you're having to rewrite our history, years together. Kind of what does that mean with me having cheated? And then you're also confronted with somebody else in your life. Like, speak to the person who is on your side of this, and is in this moment, like somebody just blew their life up, or somebody's telling them something and it is blowing their mind about that person. Why? What have you learned through that? How did you frame that moment?
Yeah, I think what was happening, because it was, it feels blurry to me now because it was so long ago, and also I think I just didn't, I couldn't process it all at once, so, but like I said, I had been beginning to process another person in my life who had shared something similar to about their life, and someone very close to me. So now I've got these two people that I feel like, do I even know them? Do I know anything about anyone? And really having to confront that kind of stuff, like confront what's real and what do I take from this? And am I too naive? Am I too trusting? Am I too forgiving? All those kinds of things. But then I think the short answer is I don't know. In one way, I don't know how I was able to come, through that and process it. But I also believe that what was happening inside of me, and this is truly like marks of the Lord in my life and the Holy Spirit kind of helping me process through things through the lens of the gospel, through the lens of what Jesus has done for us and what's possible for people.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important to understand, is that I do have that lens to see life through. But I have two people situations are completely unrelated, but that I have enough life experience with to really think that I do believe that I know this person. I do believe that I know who they are and what is underneath all of this. And now my eyes are being opened. I'm becoming more enlightened to what can happen to anybody when we're left to our flesh. And I think it's very disappointing, and it's like it can be crushing, but it was it was felt devastating in a way, but I think a devastation like takes you out, and that it didn't take me out. And I think because I could really choose to believe, I do believe I know these people, and I do
You
believe
had foundational things to
yes,
hold to.
and I had enough experience with the rest of who I knew you to be, your life, what your life spoke to, this other person, what their life showed, and this other person I had known for way longer and had seen fruit, of transformation in their life. And I think that all helped kind of rebuild my framework of what is now possible for me in a relationship with these people.
Well, I didn't, in that moment, I just say again, I didn't deserve the grace that I got, but I got it from you. And so I think because you exhibited the grace that we say that we have experienced through Jesus, and then you experienced that grace, then you extended that grace to me. The amazing thing to me about my life that I sit here today, 20 years later, and I'm able to look at people and have so much grace because I was given grace, not only from Jesus, but from you. And so because you extended that to me, my life is a totally different path. Not to say that you owed that to me, but it was a gift. That gift of grace to me changed my life forever. And it's the reason that we're even sitting here today. But I go back to that because I think for you and me, when we walk with people, we're pastoring people a lot, but I think that people are sometimes we lean heavy on the grace side.
Mm-hmm.
We hold to you still are responsible for your stuff.
Absolutely.
We're not giving a grace pass. That's not how the scriptures say
Right.
it. But we lean heavy on grace because we've been given so much
That's right.
grace, and me specifically through you. But that's something that's really beautiful that you've taught me. You've taught me a million things, so that's something big.
No.
So we broke up, and then we get back together.
Yes.
So we broke up twice.
Somehow, and that's honestly, I don't even know how that happened. That is a very blurry time of like that, having that second breakup. You share more about what's happened. I'm able to forgive in that season, and somehow think, yeah, I'm gonna give him another chance. I don't know where I was fully in that time. I think that it was again a convergence of hope and still having some, there being some naive elements to it, but also just in love with you, wanting that to work, hoping that we could really do this and believing that we could. So I was willing to step back in again.
How long were we together in that?
I think that was a 3-month situation.
Okay.
So we break up at that point.
For the third time.
And that at this point, for everybody trying to keep up with the math, that had been 7 years of time from us meeting, becoming really close friends, dating twice.
8 years. Because it was 8 years.
Okay. Sorry. 8 years.
Yeah. 8. This is your 8. We break up.
So at this point, it had been 8 years of time had passed.
Yeah.
And I am 27 years old. And just realized that my life had completely flipped upside down. And at this point, I had the presence of mind to understand, like, this book needs to be closed.
Yeah. This isn't gonna work.
I cannot let my heart do this roller coaster any longer. I need to move on with my life. Like, yeah. I was completely crushed. I really had fully believed that we could do it, that we could be married, that we could fight together, that our story would be incredible and that God would be so honored in it. And I just was holding so tightly to that hope. And then when we broke up that last time, you were also in a very low place. And I saw, so my hopes are dashed for our relationship. And also the person I love the most is in a very, very low and dark place.
So you had to walk away. That was hard for you to see me, but you couldn't fix me. And
right. And at this point I knew that.
Years of like all the trying and counseling and working through it.
Yeah. So I knew that. So I'm like, okay, I got to respect myself.
Yeah.
I got to move on. I've got to move forward and figure out my life, and rebuild at this point. I mean, another important factor of the story is that our entire lives were pretty much tangled up.
Yeah.
I was,
Friend groups,
friend groups, but also hugely, it was like ministry and career. I mean, we were leading worship together, traveling together. I had like part-time jobs on the side, but I didn't have anything sustaining me financially in that time other than what we were doing. But yeah, so everything I had just moved in with this family thinking like, oh, I'll live with them for a few months and then, get another apartment and stuff. So now I'm like, I have barely any income. So there's no other apartment to be found. I ended up living with that family for a year, trying to figure out now whose friends are whose, and it was an entire life shift.
Yeah. And then that was a 2-year period when we broke up the last time. And in that period, you started actually, you moved on, then you actually started dating somebody else.
That's right.
So you started dating somebody else. And what I was thinking in that period was, I just can't do this. But something this is just the weirdest part of it. Like in my mind, I was like, I'll be with Jourdan one day, but I can't explain that. And it's like, there's no like, well, what were you thinking? I don't know. I just was like, I think I'm going to be with her one day. But we had just broke up, and it would have been 8 years of back and forth and all the downs. And I was down, and I was again in the whole process of trying to kill my flesh and not do the things that I desired more than anything, and so I was in a weird place. But I remember the day, like, you even called me and told me you were dating somebody else. Now that sounds a little weird maybe to somebody.
Yeah, it wasn't vengeful. I was trying to be helpful to him because I thought he might run into this person, and I didn't want him to hear it from a random stranger. Which
again was just kindness. But I remember when you told me, I was standing in a some kind of like design store designing my apartment or something.
Yeah.
And I just
standing in the pillow section.
Just in the pillow section, just like standing there. I was like, thanks for telling me, hung up the phone, just started crying. I was just like, life sucks. Like that's what I felt. And I was pretty devastated in that moment.
Yeah.
And, but you were doing the right thing. You had to move on.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, what's that going to be like when I see her or run into her again? So anyway, that was happening in those 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think the important point that we need to make here, in those 2 years, we're apart. And I would say for both of us, those 2 years apart shaped us and pushed us to the Lord more than any other part of this tumultuous 8 years prior. Now, there were parts of the journey that were really amazing, but I think the moment that it really began shifting, especially for me, was when you weren't in the equation and all I had was God. So I was alone. I think people that have the same desire as me with same-sex attraction, and if you choose to fight it, I think the big question is, so what am I to do? I'm gonna be alone forever. I'm not going to ever have this fully played out. Like I'm never gonna be sexually satisfied. I'm never gonna have a family. Like I was in that place. Yeah. And I was like, so if this is all true for me and what I'm saying, that I feel the conviction, and the reason, let me explain why I would do that. Because for me, this is just for me, anytime that I had acted out physically, I could never wake up the next day without this conviction. And so the Holy Spirit is what was doing that to me. And I was convicted over my actions and my sin. And I remember through that whole period just going, I was so mad that I was a Christian. I was so mad. I remember cussing at God and being like, why did you save me? Why did you have to save me? If you didn't save me and I didn't have this, it would be so much easier to walk the life that I want to live. I was so mad. Like, and I remember specifically driving in my car one day, and that's what I was saying. I was like, but I was saying a lot of other things, a lot of cuss words to God. And it felt like I kind of even stopped, and I was like, it feels so weird to talk to God this way. All growing up, all I knew was you pray, fold your hands, pray. And it's like all, but
Respectful and
be
honoring.
respectful, honoring, which there is a reverence to God.
Absolutely.
However, what I was learning in this season was the relationship that I have referenced, that when I knew a lot about God, but then I actually knew God when I became a Christian. But in this moment, I'm actually in it where I'm just like, we're in it. We're in a relationship. You can handle this. And it felt weird, but it's what brought me the closest to him.
Yes.
And it was the point when there were many moments, many songs I was listening to, and just like worship songs, and they were carrying me through. But it was all of that anger and just cussing and being fully open with God.
Yeah.
To get to the place where it was like, but you still are there.
Mm-hmm.
You're still with me, and it's just you and me. So I can do this. I can wake up tomorrow. I can get through the next day when it feels like there isn't hope, or like life isn't like what I thought. You are still enough. And I think that was so important to me. And then that was happening for you on your side.
Would you say that you, did you land kind of in a place with the Lord? Like, okay, well, if this is it, then.
Yeah. I was like, if Jourdan's not in this equation, if she's not going to be in my life and she's moving on,
because I be with a man,
and I'm not going to be with a man because I'm making that commitment, then it's you and me. It's you and me, God. And I'll wake up tomorrow and it won't be easy, but I will again wake up tomorrow and deny my flesh. And what I would say to anyone listening is, whether that's you're same-sex attracted or any other thing that our flesh is craving, that we would say leads to anything other than God's best for us, that's the same for all of us. We all wake up and we all have to go, okay, we still have this flesh on until the day we're with Jesus forever.
Yeah.
We are going to fight, and it's the Holy Spirit living in us that's fighting with us, convicting, the relationship with Jesus, talking to him, being honest, real with him, that gets you through the day. And that's different than a Sunday school kind of God.
Totally. And you're right. I did have my version of that as well. So I'm having a fight with the Lord, and I hadn't gotten quite as comfortable as you did with the way I talk to God yet, but I was getting more real with myself. And that was really important for me, because I've mentioned before, like, I just wasn't curious about pushing any boundaries of my faith. But in this place, I was devastated at my circumstances. I was so crushed, and like realizing how, who am I now? I'm a 27-year-old woman, single in Dallas, Texas. And I don't have a job to speak of. I just lost the relationship that I thought was going to end up in marriage. And I've been called into ministry, and like, where am I even going to do that? Everything is blown up.
At that point, I felt like a lot of your friends were getting married too. And you were like, what have I done with?
Yeah, it was just a very strange existence. But also at the same time, I'm grieving. I mean, obviously I'm grieving all that I've lost, but I'm grieving for you as well. Because I'm also confused as to why God would not allow you more healing. And at that point, it wasn't even like I needed to believe that he was going to take away your same-sex desires. Like that was done. But you were so depressed and so low. And at this point, we're not in communication anymore. We've broken up, and I knew that we had to be done with like being in each other's lives.
We're not calling, we're not talking.
Totally.
One time you told me that you were dating somebody else.
Right. But I was so confused as to why your healing couldn't look more significant, like why you couldn't find hope. I mean, you did not seem to have a lot of hope for yourself. And I was wrestling with what I believed that God would do. And so in that season, I was trying to find myself again, and I was trying to find what I believed to be true about the Lord and what healing could look like.
Yeah.
And in my healing process, I will say a huge element that brought me through that was my friends and family. My roommates were amazing in that season. They were writing me notes, writing me scripture, taping it to my window. making sure that I was out and about and doing things and having fun and enjoying life still, and so incredibly supportive. So that was very important in that season for me.
Yeah.
And also as I was just leaning into the Lord and trying to be more honest with my questions and with my confusion, I'm finding more actual satisfaction with him. And I also had a moment in my car one day where yours was kind of violent and aggressive, but mine was
Well, sure, purity ring. You're like, we just have different backgrounds. You're
yeah,
driving. Like,
it's
"Hey,
our
God, Jordan
personalities.
here, really frustrated."
But actually,
So am
I had gotten to the sweetest place in my
Yeah.
relationship with the Lord that I was thinking about how all growing up, like I never wanted to say that, like, yeah, if God calls me to be single, then I'll be okay. You know, I had this mindset that like it was kind of like volunteering for it, and he was going to pick me. So I just was like, I that was not something that I was interested in. But I really actually came to a place, and I remember the moment and the space in Dallas, Texas, where I was driving, where I had the thought, I was talking to the Lord, and I was like, you really are enough. And if it's just me and you, I will be okay. And not even just that. I had actually gotten to the place where I was like, I don't want anyone else to come in here and mess up what you and I have. I don't want that to be disrupted, because it is so sweet and so satisfying. And that was, I could never express my gratitude for the ability to get to that place with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because that set my foundation for whatever was to come. But certainly for what was to come for you and I. And that was incredible. So I did date someone else.
You and your new
went on a
boyfriend are
few
praying
dates.
for me. Y'all are talking about. Okay, you're
Okay.
not. But
Our relationship had nothing to do with you.
yeah.
But yes, so I did date someone else. And even in that was a part of my healing process of like learning how to date in a healthy way, because there were a lot of elements to our dating that were not healthy. And I was not secure. And so I was finding more security, obviously, in the Lord, and just confidence in who he made me to be. And that was a really important and beautiful season of my life, was coming into myself, learning how to respect myself, learning what I was worthy of. And I'm grateful to have.
And
had
also,
the
you had leaned on me and my band to like lead worship and stuff. So now you're leading. There's amazing women who invite you into to lead a Bible
Yes, the
study
Lord was
in
taking
Dallas,
care of
and
every detail.
You're doing that. And so you're growing in your own giftings and what God's calling you to. So now you're on that path. I'm traveling and leading worship with my band. Again, it's equal to you. Like my band now, they know my story. We're walking more in the light. Like they're all, it's amazing, great accountability with all of these people who we've opened the door, let in. And then we, you have a booking. You're now booking your own things. I'm booking my own things, events.
And we both found ourselves.
In Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, all of your band and my band are friends.
Yeah.
So they all go, hey, should we? At this point, you were broken up. Important to note, you broke up with this guy.
Yes, we had.
And our friends were like, hey, should we all get together for lunch with Jeff and Jourdan? They kind of did this thing. Now, they all knew our whole history, whatever, but it was like, I think we can do this. So we go and we all have a lunch.
At this point, it felt like we were mature enough adults that we could all just hang out together and have a lunch.
2 years later, here we are. But then we have lunch together, and
it was so fun.
It was fun. It was lighthearted. It wasn't anything deep. But then we leave lunch and we go back to Dallas, and I called you.
You sent me a text.
Sent you a
text.
Now we have phones with text. Like we're years down the road. The iPhone has come out.
I had actually had a blind date that day. So a friend of mine had set me up with this guy. We had gone to lunch. It was very nice. He was a great guy. But I left the lunch thinking, I was thinking back to the weekend before in Tulsa and how it was just, it always felt so natural with you and so easy to pick back up. And I was thinking, I don't think I'll ever be able to have that kind of connection with someone ever again. And I was even having another moment of grief of like, man, I don't know. I don't know that there's anybody else that I could connect with like I connect with Jeff. And then I get this text from you. And the gist of it is, hey, I know you're busy this week, but I was hoping that maybe we could get together just for 30 minutes. I was hoping to just chat with you a bit and maybe clear some things up from last weekend.
What did you think?
And I was so annoyed. I was like, first of all, we're not like texting buddies at this point. So you texted me that and I'm thinking like, what is there to clear up? I'm good. Like, you don't need to come break up with me again because I'm fine. Like, that's literally the things that were going through my head was I don't have anything wrong here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. We can just keep moving on. So I'm thinking like, okay, let's just get this over with. So we meet up at Starbucks and I'm probably
now on my side of that story, I get back in the van. We get back in my van in Tulsa with my band guys. And we get in the car, and as we start driving away, they all are like, it's real quiet. And then one of the guys is just like, you sure you don't want to be with her? And it's like, I was like, what am I? And it was just like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? She is all that I truly want. And it's taken me, I've had to go down this whole path where it's like, okay, it's just God and I, and I'm fine with that. But if you're all that I want, and I believe that we can make this work, and I don't still have the answers of how this is going to actually work on a intimacy level, but I'm like, I'm doing this. I want to walk this life with her. She pushes me towards the Lord. We can figure out all the details, but the little details left, which are big, but in that moment it felt small. So that's what I'm thinking. And then we
get to Starbucks, and I probably like have my arms crossed, like, okay, what do you have to say? And you proceed to like talk for like 20 minutes and I didn't say anything. And I'm sitting there.
I was nervous.
You started talking about kind of like the past and like, you know, some of your regrets from the past. And so at the beginning, I'm thinking like, oh, wow, he's really done some self-reflection. He's and he wants to express like that all the things that he wished that he would have done differently. And you were apologizing for the way you treated me. And I think it should be noted too that I felt like I was looking at and listening to an entirely different person. Maybe not entirely. You still had your personality, but a very different person.
Hi, George.
You still had your same voice.
I love football.
That not that far.
Okay.
We'll never go that far.
No, go ahead.
But you were a different person.
Yep.
And I could see that. And you're talking about, you know, all this stuff from the past and how I've realized and learned how I treated you. And so at first I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, well, okay, this is not what I expected. This is really kind. Like he's just being remorseful and repentant for the way that he treated me. And then you sort of slowly started to turn a corner and get into this like future talk and like what I hope for maybe what could be. And so then I'm starting to get like confused, like, wait, what is he saying? And you've kind of wrapped up your speech, because it did feel like a speech. And then I literally had to ask a clarifying question. I remember. And I think I said something like,
I said, check yes or no.
But I said, so what do you mean by that? And you basically said like, I'm hoping that you would give me another chance because I want to be together.
And I was clear with my intention. I said, I want to be married.
Yeah. And you were like, I want to be together forever.
Yeah.
And I was shocked.
And you also said, you didn't give me an answer.
No. I said, I thank you for sharing. Like, I'm going to need to go and process this.
Which it wasn't really shocking to me because but I think one of the biggest things you said is you need to talk to my dad. Mm-hmm. My family has been through.
Well, I sat on it for like a week before I tell you.
You said nothing. You left. Then you called me and said, I think you need to talk to my dad.
Yeah. Because the point of that was my family had been through the ringer with me.
Yeah.
And I felt like they deserved some explanation. And
your dad
your
did
intention.
Not know my actual struggle, my battle at this moment. So then you say you needed to talk to my dad. So I had to call your dad, and I would have loved to do it in person, but I wanted time moving quickly. And so I called your dad, and I had to tell him over the phone, hey, your boy here that wants to marry your daughter is same-sex attracted, but we've walked a road that I believe that we've seen enough of God to know that he can provide for us down the road.
Yeah.
And your dad, which we'll talk about this in future episodes and want to even bring him on the podcast and talk to him, because your dad was like, I know that my daughter was meant to be with you. And
which is nothing short of just the Lord
absolutely
doing it.
I mean, if somebody hurt your kid like I had hurt you, it's again, grace upon grace that I was given. And so when he said, you have my blessing, and in all of that, he didn't, again, your dad is a man's man, and he didn't understand the struggle. He didn't understand a lot of things in it, but the grace.
But he wasn't afraid.
He wasn't afraid of it.
And that was really,
and we're talking
huge.
about he grew up in the Baptist church from a little kid, and he was very gracious to me, and that's what I want to be.
Yeah.
I want to be like him. And so anyway, he gave me grace. And so then we moved a couple months down the road. Well,
yeah, I still was processing it on my end because for the past 2.5 years at this point, I had been working to rebuild my life and move on from you. And I mean, I have journals from that time where I'm literally praying that the Lord will take my desires for you away. Like I'm just want so badly, so rude. I want so badly though, to just be able to heal and move on and see what else could happen in my life. But also in that season too, he was showing me just in my personal time in the Word. I was reading through the book of Luke. I was reading through Jesus's miracles. I mean, he's doing all this work in me personally that I don't think has anything to do with you. But just showing me what do you believe I can do? Yeah. What do you believe I can do in a person's story, in a person's life, and challenging me in that. So there were all these ways that he was preparing me for this moment that I couldn't see until the moment in Starbucks where you sort of bring this all to me again. And so because of all that, because I could look back and see he was preparing, he was doing this work here in the scriptures, he was doing this work here in this encounter, in this moment in Tulsa, there were all these things. And I knew that because he had also brought me to a place where prior to this, I knew that he was enough for me, that I didn't need you. I didn't need you to affirm me. I didn't need you to complete me. I didn't need that. I had everything I needed, but where I could see, no, I think that this story is what God has written for us. And there's no other way to fully explain it apart from a miraculous work of God, because it doesn't rationally make sense. But he brought me to that place where I could soberly kind of come into this place of saying, I think that this is what he wants for us.
And you came and told me that.
Yeah.
You came and told me, we end up getting back together for our final time. And a couple months down the road, like we were 2 months, 3 months in, we're sitting in my house in Dallas, and we are having a conversation yet again around my dining room table. And
this is like a full convergence for you of, again, you kind of found yourself in this place of like, I don't know if I can do this.
Right. But again, here we are 10 years in, and I'm like, okay, again, it just feels really big. And I had to tell you that again around the dining room table. And I tell you that, and I'm like, I just don't know if I can do it. And we were about 2 seconds from another breakup. And I said, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to walk that road of a breakup again. I said to you, I committed to you. I've talked, like, your family, all of this is, God has something for us. And we're not going back. We're moving forward. And so should we get married? That's what I said. I was like, should we get married? And you said, yeah. And then we kind of looked at each other. And we're like, that's great. And we hugged. You sat in my lap. And then I was like,
it was very romantic.
And then I said, so are we engaged? And we were like, I guess we're engaged then. And I mean, no ring, nothing, not a plan. And for anyone that knows me, like, I would have.
This is a guy that loves the grand gesture.
I would have loved to like flown to Paris and like under the Eiffel Tower. And here we are at my dining room table. So,
it was total raw.
And I would never take it back for anything.
Absolutely.
For us, when people say, what was your proposal? Well, I did come a week later, a couple weeks later, I got the ring. And then we actually did a proposal at the place where I did a proposal at the place where I told you my story.
Trouble, yeah.
And that was so significant to us. And it was more of a gesture with the ring and like, we're doing this. But then we are, okay, we're in it. We're moving forward with marriage. And that's what we're going to get into.
And for anybody who really has enjoyed the math of our story, that was all in 2010. You came to me with I'd like to get another chance in March.
Yep.
Or like February. We got back together in March and engaged in September.
And then set our wedding date in November over Thanksgiving weekend because it was quick.
So 2010 was a big year for us.
Big year. So that is where we find ourselves in the story. 10 years later, 3 major breakups, lots of God doing amazing things.
We did it.
And we'll tell you about our wedding in the next, and what we're doing now in the next episode.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Thanks so much for listening today. We would, again, want to point you to our website, openspacespodcast.com, where we would love to hear your questions. Our hope is that we'll get questions and then we'll sift through those and figure out what we can answer and actually do a Q&A at some point coming up to answer as many as we can in the ways that we feel like we're equipped to do. So
we want you to join us next time. Not to spoil it, but we're getting married. And we're going to talk a lot about sex. So if that interests you at all, then tune in and we'll see you there on the Open Spaces.